Hi, I'm Sarah Hart from Drive Hart. So today I'm going to deliver a briefing on meeting traffic. So the first thing I'll be asking my pupil is, what do we mean by meeting traffic? And the answer is, it's any situation where the road is too narrow for two cars to pass. And very often that can be a parked car that's blocking the road, making the road too narrow. But of course the other thing it might be is some roadworks or a country lane, or some traffic calming solutions, or anything like that. And obviously I'll be asking the pupils to try and come up with some of those answers. So it's very much an interactive session. So the first thing I might be doing is putting our little Drive Hart car on the magnetic board. We have an oncoming car there, and we have a parked car on that side of the road. So the question would be, in this situation, who would have priority? Would it be us or the oncoming car? Most of them will come up with the answer that it's us that's got priority, because we've got a clear lane, we don't have any blockages. We still need to check our mirror on approach to the hazard, being the silver car, because there's no guarantee that the mustard coloured car will wait, although he should. So at this point I'd be asking my pupils to come up with reasons why the mustard car might not wait. The reasons might be he's in a rush, he's in a hurry, he's misjudged our speed and distance. Perhaps he's misjudged the width of the road and he thinks we can all get through. Maybe he hasn't been paying attention and he hasn't even seen the silver car until it's too late. So again, I'll be doing Q&A with the pupil to try and get them to come up with some of those ideas. So that's a fairly straightforward situation. I'll then move the parked car over to our side of the road and again ask who's got priority, and clearly the mustard car has got priority in this situation. So I'd now ask the pupil to actually place our car in the place that they would decide to wait for the mustard car. Many of them will put the car too close to the curb or too close to the parked car, and we'll discuss reasons why that would be inappropriate. And clearly, if we're sitting there in that position, another car coming up behind us is going to think we're parked, so that would create difficulty. So what I'm trying to get them to understand is that we want to be well back and well out from the silver car. Obviously we can't be too far over because we don't want to encroach on the other side of the road, but well back and well out is a good situation. That way we've got a good view of the mustard car. Anybody coming up behind us can clearly see that we're waiting to move around. If we were worried about the car behind, again, Q&A, I'd get the pupil to try and come to the rationale that we'll need to put a right signal on. So Mr. Mustard has gone through there. We're now good to mirror and move off when it's safe. So that's a fairly straightforward situation. So now we'd have another parked car. So we've got a parked car either side. So again, I'd be asking the pupil, it's all fully interactive, who's got priority here? Is it us, is it them, or is it 50-50? And most of them will come up with the correct answer that it's a 50-50 situation. So what to do? So I will explain to them it's always a good idea to be prepared to hold back. If we're always the one prepared to hold back, we can't really come into too much difficulty. So again, we'd be looking at the position of our hold back, which would be about there. But of course, the guy in the mustard coloured car might also be a considerate driver. He might want to hold back for us. But how would he let us know that he's holding back? And again, I'd try and get them to come up with, maybe the chap in the mustard car would flash his lights, maybe he'd wave. Can we guarantee that as a safe for us to proceed? There are issues with flashing lights. It can be a signal that's misinterpreted, because of course flashing our lights purely means I am here. But people will flash their lights, so we need to respond with caution coming through the gap. Of course, the danger is that the mustard coloured car has flashed his lights, there's a pedestrian here waiting to cross. The pedestrian thinks he's been flashed to walk across, so he steps out as we come through. So that's why when we're responding to the flash of a light, we'd need to be doing it with great caution. And boot on the other foot, I don't want us to be flashing our lights or waving our hands. So if we're going to be holding back, we'll let our car do the talking, let the body language of the car do the talking by literally just sitting there and holding back. Obviously, if he's letting us go, we're going to go through first. I'll then introduce another couple of cars into the scenario, and maybe there's 3 cars there and 1 car there. And again, who would have priority? And most of them will say, well, the mustard car's got priority because he's only got 1 parked car on his side and we've got 3. But of course we might have 20 down one side and 21 down the other side, and we can't see them, we haven't got time to count them. So when there's any sort of mishmash of cars parked there, we're going to always treat it as a 50-50, and again always be the one prepared to hold back. So that's the basics of it. So if it's a mishmash, always be prepared to hold back. but respond accordingly to what the other car's doing. So just on a basic 50-50 where we've got one car each side, I'll then ask the pupils if a hill would have any make any difference to the priorities. And very often they'll say the car coming down the hill would have priority, but actually it's a bit of an old-fashioned courtesy that if you're coming up the hill, the guy should allow you to keep moving, because particularly in older times when our cars weren't quite so efficient, if you stopped on the hill it's quite hard to get going, or if you're driving a longer, larger vehicle, very hard to get a big lorry go chugging up the hill. Once they've stopped, it's very hard to get going again. Or perhaps if the road surface is a little bit slippery, maybe it's a bit icy or gravelly or gritty, you want to try and keep your momentum coming up that hill. So a bit of a courtesy rule, and not one that everyone sticks to, is we should allow traffic coming up the hill priority if it's a 50-50. So that's about it really, but the main message about successfully meeting traffic is to look really far ahead. It comes again to that planning and anticipation. Having a little plan up our sleeve that if we're going around a corner and there's some parked cars, if a parked car came into view here, I could use this wide bit of road to get out of the way. And it's a very interesting subject. It's one that's always full of excitement and challenges for the pupil, because no matter where you go, the situation will always be different each time. So there's lots of learning to be had. So that is meeting traffic.
Just one final question. Any advice on clearance? You've talked about road positioning being important, but as you move through parked vehicles, any advice on clearances?
Yes, absolutely. We should give at least a door's width when we're coming through, if at all possible, because obviously we've got to think about people in the car might just swing the door open. So a door's width plus is good. There are times when, because the road is quite narrow, you actually can't give a door's width because it's so small. If you think about the little streets in Salisbury, sometimes you're squeezing through a gap. But obviously the closer you get to your parked cars, the slower you've got to go.
And finally, any special considerations for large vehicles like HGVs and buses?
Yes, a good question. So if you're waiting back for an HGV to come through a gap such as this, you've got to give them lots of room because they've got to get their whole lorry through. So you want to hold well back. Give them lots of room. They're long vehicles. They need much more space to come back in onto their side of the road.
And would you consider, even if it was your priority, holding back in certain circumstances with an approaching HGV?
Yes, good example is Churchill Way in Salisbury, Churchill Way near the industrial estate. Sometimes an HGV is going to be stuck there for ages if you're not going to be prepared to give way because there's reams of oncoming traffic. So, in that situation, there's nothing wrong with holding back and letting the big guys come through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.